A ferocious wildfire crisis has erupted across Spokane, Washington, turning a quiet Saturday afternoon into one of the most destructive natural disasters in the city's history. In a matter of hours, a fire nobody was tracking that morning became a story that will define this city's wildfire season for years. What began as a modest brush fire just before noon on August 1st exploded within hours into a catastrophic firestorm, now known as the Old Trails Fire, forcing tens of thousands of residents to flee for their lives. From 50 acres to a firestorm in hours, the fire ignited near Old Trails Road and West Euclid Road, west of Spokane, in an area known as the West Plains, normally quiet grassland and scattered rural homes, not the kind of place anyone expected to become the center of a citywide emergency. Conditions on the ground were primed for disaster before a single spark even fell. Eastern Washington was under a rare and historic particularly dangerous situation warning, an escalation above the standard red flag warning that the National Weather Service reserves for only the most extreme fire weather, the kind of alert meteorologists issue only a handful of times a year, if that. Wind gusts tore through the region at 35 to 50 miles per hour, humidity dropped into the single digits, and the region remained locked in its fourth consecutive year of statewide drought, meaning the grass, brush, and trees across the West Plains were about as dry as fuel gets. Under those conditions, the fire didn't simply grow, it detonated. Within a matter of hours, it expanded from an estimated 50 acres to well over 2,000, then pushed past 3,000 acres by early Sunday morning. That's a growth rate that outpaces almost anything firefighters typically train for. Witnesses described the blaze making sustained crown runs, with flames racing through treetops rather than creeping along the ground, a phenomenon that allows a fire to outrun containment efforts entirely and leap over roads, rivers, and other natural barriers that would normally slow it down. Into the city, driven by relentless wind, the Old Trails Fire tore through Riverside State Park and then jumped the Spokane River itself, carrying embers and flame directly into residential neighborhoods on the city's north side. A river crossing like that is exactly the kind of moment fire officials dread. It's the difference between a wildland fire and an urban conflagration. And once it happened, the character of this emergency changed completely. The Indian Trail neighborhood bore the brunt of the destruction. Homes ignited one after another, with residents reporting loud explosions echoing through the thick smoke as houses, vehicles, and propane tanks succumbed to the heat. One local resident described the scene as feeling like a bomb going off in the middle of a densely populated neighborhood, not a wildfire creeping through brush, but something closer to a war zone, with structure after structure lost in the span of minutes. As the fire tore into the city, authorities issued Level 3 Go Now evacuation orders, the highest level possible, for a rapidly expanding area stretching from north of Francis Avenue and west of Division Street. Thousands of families abandoned their homes with little more than what they could carry, jamming roads with traffic as cars lined the streets in a desperate rush to safety. For many residents, there was no time to gather belongings, find pets, or even fully process what was happening before they had to leave. Riverside State Park and the Dwight Merkel Sports Complex were evacuated entirely. Emergency officials say the full scale of destruction is still unknown. Spokane's mayor said the city is not yet in a position to discuss the magnitude of property loss, while emergency management officials admitted the situation remained too dynamic overnight to get an accurate count of homes and structures destroyed. Estimates suggest as many as 4,000 to 5,000 structures were under direct threat at the height of the fire's advance, a number that, if it holds anywhere close to accurate, would place this among the most significant urban interface fire events in the state's recent history. Not the only fire burning. The Old Trails Fire was not burning alone, and that matters, because it meant the emergency response was never able to focus entirely on a single incident. 2 additional fires broke out in Spokane County within the same window, compounding an already overwhelmed system. The Fairview Fire near the town of Medical Lake grew to nearly 1,000 acres and prompted its own Level 3 evacuation orders. A third blaze, the Meadowview Fire, burned roughly 500 acres. Together, the 3 fires stretched firefighting resources to their absolute limit, with crews reporting zero containment on the Old Trails fire as of Saturday evening, even as wind conditions showed no sign of easing. 3 simultaneous large fires in one county, all fed by the same extreme wind and drought conditions, is exactly the scenario emergency planners fear most. It means every engine, every crew, and every aircraft has to be split across multiple fronts instead of concentrated where it's needed most. The state response: Washington Governor Bob Ferguson declared a state of emergency and activated the Washington National Guard to assist overwhelmed local crews. He also imposed a statewide burn ban that will remain in effect through the end of September, a clear signal that officials expect these dangerous conditions to persist well beyond this single weekend. The Federal Emergency Management Agency authorized federal funding to help cover firefighting costs, and the state mobilized additional resources under its Fire Services Resource Mobilization Plan, the mechanism Washington uses to pull crews and equipment from other parts of the state into the hardest-hit areas. Officials have also requested very large air tankers to help slow the fire's advance, though extreme wind has at times grounded aerial firefighting operations altogether. That's one of the cruelest aspects of a wind-driven fire like this one. The exact conditions that make the fire so dangerous on the ground are often the same conditions that make it too risky to fly aircraft in to help fight it. Pilots simply can't safely drop retardant or water in gusts that strong, which leaves ground crews doing much of the work alone during the worst stretches of the fire's advance. Power cuts and a city bracing for impact, utility disruptions have compounded the chaos. Avista, the region's power provider, cut electricity to roughly 1,800 customers in northwest Spokane as a precautionary safety measure, separate from outages caused directly by the fire burning into its infrastructure. The company said it would begin assessing restoration needs once conditions were safe enough for crews to access the area, meaning some residents may be without power for an extended stretch, even after the flames themselves move on. Emergency shelters have opened to house displaced residents, including one at a local community college, and the Red Cross has been fielding calls around the clock from residents seeking help or looking to donate. For a lot of families, that shelter is where they'll be spending the next several nights, uncertain whether their homes are still standing. Pet owners fleeing the flames have scrambled to find safe haven for animals as well, with local shelters accepting evacuated pets. Some residents have reported pets lost or injured in the chaos, including animals that suffered burns while escaping the flames, a heartbreaking detail in a disaster that's already asked so much of this community in such a short window of time. Part of a much bigger pattern. This disaster fits into a much larger and troubling pattern across Washington state this year. More than 425,000 acres have burned statewide so far in 2026, the most since 2021, with more than 1,000 individual fires recorded. Officials say more than 4,000 firefighting personnel are currently deployed across the state, battling a dozen large fires that together have consumed over 200,000 acres. State officials have not minced words about the severity of the season, calling it one of the busiest wildfire years on record, and noting grimly that it's only the beginning of August. That timing detail is worth sitting with for a second. Wildfire season in the Pacific Northwest typically doesn't peak until late summer, which means a fire event of this scale happening this early is a warning sign for what could still be ahead in the weeks to come. Where things stand right now. As of the most recent updates, containment on the Old Trails fire remains at 0%. That number alone tells you how far this situation still has to go before anyone can call it under control. Officials are urging anyone in the affected areas to rely only on official evacuation maps and live updates from local emergency management, rather than secondhand reports or social media rumors, given how quickly the situation continues to shift. Boundaries that are accurate 1 hour can be badly out of date the next. Meteorologists warn that fire weather conditions across eastern Washington are expected to remain dangerous in the immediate term, meaning further growth, additional evacuations, and continued risk to life and property remain real possibilities in the hours ahead. Until winds ease and humidity recovers, crews are essentially working defense, trying to protect what's left rather than push the fire back. The bottom line: What started as a routine brush fire report just before noon on a Saturday turned, within hours, into one of the most destructive fires Spokane has ever seen, jumping a river, tearing into a residential neighborhood, and forcing a state of emergency, a National Guard activation, and a statewide burn ban, all in less than a day. With zero containment, extreme wind in the forecast, and two other fires burning simultaneously in the same county, this remains a fast-moving, dangerous, and very much unresolved emergency. If you're anywhere near the affected areas, the advice from officials is simple. Don't wait for a second warning, follow official evacuation orders the moment they're issued, and check verified sources for updates rather than what you see circulating online.